Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. Today I want to look at forgiveness, which is interesting. It occurred to me, I haven't done the analysis or anything, but I'm fairly certain if you would go back over everything I've ever posted on this channel, there's probably no topic that I hit more than forgiveness. And that's not because I'm super great at it. Probably, if anything, it's because I'm still working on it. It is the only thing that Jesus made super plain and clear of the way you forgive each other is the way God is going to forgive you. So I think it's really stinking important for us to get this right. Which is nothing new. I mean, even his disciples were recognizing this is clearly a big deal. That's why in Matthew 18, starting at verse 21, it says, And Peter came to him and asked, Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? No, not 7 times, Jesus replied, but 70 times 7. And I have talked about this before, and pretty much any preacher ever has talked about this passage. That for one, it's interesting to note that in the teaching of the day, it was generally taught that 3 times was like the magic number. It was a full-on 3 strikes and you're out, and I don't have to keep forgiving you anymore because you are clearly just a bad person or something like that. And a lot of people think Peter was like either trying to really stretch and see maybe I could do this, or maybe he was trying to show off. But one way or the other, he came and said, how about if I double it and add 1? Is that enough? If we go clear up to 7, and by the way, 7 is also the number of completion in the Bible. So he was like, if I go clear to 7, clear out there to 7, would that be enough times to forgiving someone? And Jesus responds, that's not 7 times, but 70 times 7. And you'll never find any Bible scholar or theologian who says, yes, Jesus taught that 490 is the limit. And after that, you just beat that person to a pulp. That is clearly not what's being taught. Jesus is taking what seemed like a stretch already and blowing it out of the water and saying so far beyond that you couldn't even imagine it. And that's why the very next thing he does is tell this parable that's often called like the unforgiving debtor or something like that. And it's about this guy who owed his master a gargantuan amount of money. If you do the math on it for modern currency, it's about $22 billion that he owes. Now, how you let someone rack up that kind of a debt, I'm not sure. But that's what this guy owed. And the master says, hey, pay me what you owe me. And he's like, oh, just give me a little bit of time and I'll get that, which is nonsense. There's no way he's ever going to do that. This is literally thousands of years of wages. And the king says, you know what? Never mind. Forget the whole thing. You're free and clear. Go ahead. And as far as we can tell, the guy is appreciative of it, but he heads out and real quickly finds another dude who owed him some money, which translates to about 30 grand. So it's nothing to sneeze at. It's a decent amount of money. And he goes to him and says, pay me what you owe me. The exact same the king had just said to him. And the guy says, well, just give me a little bit of time. The same thing he had just said. Should be able to see the pattern here. But instead, he will have none of it, has the guy thrown in prison until he can pay, which I guess was a thing of how it works. I'm not sure how being in prison lets you pay a debt, but that's how it worked then. But pretty quickly, word gets back to the king of what just went down. In verse 32, it says, Then the king called in the man he had forgiven and said, You evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had mercy on you? And this right here is the key to forgiveness. Just like 1 John 4:19 says, we love each other because he first loved us. It's exactly the same way that we forgive each other because he first forgave us. It's by recognizing the forgiveness that we have received that enables us to extend forgiveness. And a big piece of it is getting the scale correct, recognizing what we've been forgiven. We are so prone to minimize our own sins and maximize anybody else's. The things that I have done, especially the things I have done to God, I'm so apt to downplay and somehow convince myself it's not really that big a deal. But the way that person offended me, oh, how could you ever do something like that? And I am convinced that exactly that contrast and scale is the point Jesus was making in this parable. If you do the math on it, the ratio between what the guy was forgiven versus how much he was owed is a little over 730,000 to 1. That's just shy of $750,000. So let's put it in those terms. For every dollar that that guy owes you, you owe God $750,000. Your sin against him, your offense that you have committed against the God of the universe, is 730,000 times worse than anything that anybody has done to you. When we can view in that perspective, it enables us to be able to forgive someone else. It's only when we lose sight of that, like the servant in this parable did, that we still think that that thing, that debt that you owe me is such a big deal that I cannot let it go. Because don't mistake, the Bible never, ever says that forgiveness is pretending there was no offense. In fact, by definition, Forgiveness means there is something to forgive. It's a real offense. It's a real debt that is owed. That's what makes forgiveness such a beautiful thing. That's what makes the forgiveness that Jesus offers us such a beautiful thing. And it's why he expects us to give it to other people as well. And that's why I keep talking about it, because Jesus talked about it so much. And he did things like 70 times 7 or 730,000 to 1 to express just how big of a deal this is, just how far we should be willing to go. Not because God is saying, you play nice, kids, but because God has forgiven us so much that we certainly ought to be able to extend a relatively minuscule forgiveness to each other. That's our job. That's what he expects of us. And that's what he said is going to determine how we are treated. Exactly in this story, if we're going to receive forgiveness of $22 billion, then even though 30 grand is a lot of money, we ought to be able to forgive that. Not because that's how we earn God's love, but that's how we reflect his love. That's how we demonstrate what he did for me, I will do for you. Jesus took this really seriously, so we darn well should too.